All right, I think we're going. Welcome back to another one of these things where we just talk about kinda whatever. And today is Tuesday. I almost forgot it was Tuesday. I wrapped up some work stuff at somewhere time between 4 and 4:30, and then watched a YouTube video about Sonic design stuff. And it was 5, and I'm like, I should probably go get some food. And then I was like, oh gosh, it's Tuesday, and I have to write a haiku. And I went ahead and did that, and I can still apparently operate under pressure. At least underneath time pressure. Well, it turned out okay. Like, found a decent photo, and found a fairly quick inspiration from that. I don't know why. I really like thinking about time in sort of a bigger picture type thing. Like, humans are pretty good at recognizing time from getting by day to day, understanding years that go by, and probably the amount of time that's going on or going past throughout their lifetime. And we have different like perspectives of, how that time travels as we get older, but like we're okay at like being like, yeah, 10 years ago or 30 years ago. So I'm pretty bad at 30 years ago because 30 years ago I was 3. But if you're older, you might be like, yeah, I remember being a teenager, even if you were like 50, or not 50 at the time, but even if you were 50 thinking about when you were a teenager, you might remember some of that stuff. And have a fairly decent grasp of just how long ago that actually was. Though I feel like I'm pretty bad at that these days, honestly. So maybe that's not a good, like, just across the board kind of thing. Like, I think I was a teenager 10 years ago, just indefinitely. Like, I was always in high school 10 years ago. That's not true. I mean, it's pretty close to true, but my idea of pretty close to true is getting further and further away from the truth as I get older. Where I'm like, it's like within 3 years, and that's not really true. It's within 5 years. And then when I'm 40, it'll feel like it was 10 years ago, and then I'll be like, oh, it's only like 13 years off. It's pretty close. Yeah. But in contrast to that, people are generally pretty bad at thinking about time in sort of a geological sense. How you can call something geologic time. How we track prehistory and things like that by investigating the earth in different ways. And I like kind of philosophizing, thinking philosophically about those kinds of aspects of time. So, like, even if it's like not necessarily a fantastic picture, or it doesn't have like a great like subject matter to it. The photo I used for today's Haikus Day was just a little bit of a stream next to a bunch of rocks on a shoreline and a tree line that met the sky. It wasn't particularly exciting. I've taken plenty of better photos, but all of that creating a scene that was in front of me at the time of taking that photo is literally trillions of seconds of time that it took everything to get to that point where it was when it was there before me at that moment of taking the photo. Which is really hard to kind of wrap your head around, or at least I think it's kind of hard to wrap my head around, that there is so much time to have been had, and not everything in that photo was even around for all of that. How did I put it? Timelessness in view, pebbles and trees, or from pebbles to trees, or from pebbles to the trees, eons they've seen before you, or they've stood before you. And that's not entirely true. The entire thing hasn't been standing there the entire time. The rocks that are there now haven't been waiting for you that entire time. They've traveled the earth for quite some time. Any of the stones that were in that picture formed over eons and moved their way to being in that position, so that from that point, my now, at some time in the past, had all of that arranged in front of me in the way that was captured on film. And like the trees have been there for even less time. Like the rocks themselves might not have been there for as long as the trees have been, but the rocks have been around for even longer than the trees had been there. Even the biggest ones, the oldest ones, even if they've been there for hundreds of years, most rocks have been around for thousands, millions of years, just breaking down as a part of the planet, which is just kind of fascinating. That kind of time is incomprehensible to people. It's really hard to think in time like that. It spans way beyond even what we consider a generation, which is probably one of the worst words that we've ever come up with in the human lexicon, just because we like thinking about it in terms of like a generation younger or a generation older, even though it's never that cut and dry. Like humans just don't have a breeding season every 30 years, and like all of those people are that generation, and then you miss the mating season, you have to wait another 30 years for the next slew of humans to be born. It's not like that, but we treat it like it is, where like we're kind of like, if you were born around this time, when really it really isn't that you're born around this time, it's that you likely went to high school or grade school and high school around this time. Like, I don't think like me as a millennial was defined by the late 80s because I wasn't there for it. I was defined by the late 90s and the early 2000s culture. Just as a kid in grade school, and then just defining what culture was for a lot of people going from high school into college. It's kind of funny just how much of our culture is defined by whatever generation, whatever group of people is currently in high school. They're just generating all of the meme content or whatever was hip and cool at the time. And then everybody sort of just jumps on that wagon. People are marketing to that. That's how you make money. But when we think about generations like that, we're thinking about it in generally like 30-year chunks. But it's not like a 30-year chunk. It's just a constant stream of people living and getting older and moving through time. And we do okay at thinking about maybe 3 of those. Like, we know people that were our parents, we know us, and we know the people who come after us. We're very good at knowing those ones. We're pretty bad at understanding kind of like our grandparents' time. At least I'm pretty bad at it. Like, I know how I grew up with my parents, and I know how, like, and this is a good example of like the people younger than me. Some of my cousins are in a generation after me, even though they're my cousins. Some of my other cousins are right around my age. But like, I don't really consider that my grandparents grew up in a time where the city block wasn't like a thing that you'd come across that often. Where we were living was still mostly farmland when they were growing up, from where I grew up. Like, I had a high school across the street from me that did not exist when my grandparents were there. That was a farm. And it's kind of interesting that, like, just the world changes that in kind of that short of time. And that's not even geologic time. There are parts of time that I have a hard time fathoming that were within the past 100 years. I can't begin to understand what a place could have looked like 1,000 years ago, thousands of years ago, millions of years ago. So it's just kind of an interesting thing, an interesting concept to kind of break down and sort of think about, that everything that you see at any given moment is really just a bunch of individual things, moments, all culminating in this exact now in front of you. And it's kind of weird. Like, if you think about it all the time, it's probably going to overwhelm you. So definitely don't think about it all the time. Don't over consider the bigness of now. And just kind of understand that, like, every once in a while, it's okay to kind of get lost in that thought that even something as insignificant as the tree in front of you, this dog scratching its ear in front of me, all of these things are just a bunch of events and choices and things that could have gone in any other way that would have resulted in a different now than what I just experienced, or I'm currently experiencing. As now is, even though now isn't real. It's different for everybody. Heather's now over there is different than my now over here. Even if it is by hairs of a second, it's not a real thing. It is your perception, and that's it. But this is getting pretty deep here. I think I wasn't even going to talk that much about the deepness of time. But here we are. All because I had thought to write on the deepness of time 3 lines in syllables of 5, 7, and 5. Because of a picture I took in Grand Teton National Park 2 years ago. 2 years ago? Yeah, it was 2 years ago. All of those moments leading to this moment where a lot of other choices came together for me to even decide to make a channel to talk to people about the deepness of time. Okay. I think we're going to sort of lose my mind over just how crazy everything is. Just when it's acting normally, just how crazy it can be that it's just there are so many other possibilities, and yet we have found ourselves converging on this one together. Ain't it cool? Anyway, hope you're having a wonderful Tuesday, and that continues into a wonderful Wednesday. And we will catch you in the next one. See ya.